Hey there, this is Campo and welcome back to my channel. And on today's video, we're going to be talking a little bit about Venom and compare him to the newly buffed Venompool. And I will say, before I get into anything negative, that I do actually really like this new buff that they gave to Venompool. I think it's very close to the identity of the character and what you would expect, sort of a completely insane random champion like Deadpool mixed with Venom symbiote would actually be. So I do really like it, and I think that, you know, the sort of takeaway of this video, if you don't want to actually watch it, is that, you know, Venom is a tried and true champion that has helped a lot of people get through a lot of content over the last years since his buff. And Venompool is probably going to be a decent substitute, but he isn't going to hold up to the original Venom except for damage. So anyway, that's sort of the tidbits of what we're going to talk about today. The way we're going to structure this video, I'm actually about to start a little bit of a clip in the background. It's hard to test these two champs because the only place that I had a one-to-one with them was as 4 stars. So these are both going to be maxed out 4 stars, max sig 550. And unfortunately, since we can't try them out in something like Act 6, we have to do it in variant. So this is the symbiote variant. Technically, symbiotes get a little bit of a benefit from this fight, but I'm not going to be utilizing it. You have to kind of dash back and hold block to get a little bit of additional effects. So far, as you can see, Venom is completely shutting down the Spider-Man evade right from the very beginning. The only nodes that we have on this fight are the ones that increase his evade probability, which will never happen, so we don't have to worry about it. In terms of RNG, I am getting a little bit more of the defensive type buffs than I would like. I have 2 physical resists and 1 armor. Now we have 2 armors, so unfortunately we're not seeing the most damage that we can get from Venom, but I did decide to keep this clip just as a reality check that sometimes Venom is not going to be set up the way you wanted. You can certainly throw in some heavies if you want to re-roll his buffs, but at this point, because I have all these defensive buffs, it is definitely helping with the block damage, but I am ready to throw a big special 2, convert them into 7 Furies. That's sort of when you want to do that. I didn't get in as many hits as I wanted, but you know, the damage is still pretty good considering this is chapter 3 or quest, whatever, it's 3.1 I think of a variant content. So the attack on this champion is very, very high for a 4-star, and the health pool, I think, you know, looking at the amount of health that he has and the fact that I'm using a 4-star, that, you know, that we're sort of on pace to do it a little bit over 100 hits, the damage is still quite good with Venom, you know, and that was always the thing with Venom, is like he had usable damage. It was not as high as his counterpart Carnage can be and some other champions in the Cosmic class for certain, but he always had above average damage, and the reliability of his utility, in this case just turning off of the evade and being able to smash in the corner against this Spider-Man without worrying about anything. And we'll see that he gets down in, it said 121 hits, but realistically it was like 115 hits with a little bit of overkill. So now we're going to compare this to Venompool, and again, this is a max sig, which means he has about a 60% chance to roll a buff that we want at the beginning. So I'm going to pick this Clintar mutation, which is the one that will stop evade, and what we're hoping is to just get in a couple combos so that we get our cooking meter where it needs to be. He already evaded, which was kind of interesting. I didn't think he could evade. I accidentally got that little symbiote buff up, but it didn't really do anything. So okay, we got an energize, so I'm going to start trying to heavy him to re-roll, and we get the Groot buff, which is something else, and then finally we get Clintar mutation. So I wanted to also keep this fight to show you that even if you have a max sig Deadpool, you're always going to have the chance that you don't get the buff you want, and it can be a little stressful at the beginning of a fight when you're trying to rely on Spider-Man evade countering. But fortunately, we are good to go now. And what I'm trying to do is, you know, interrupt my dance back type thing so that we can get these power gain buffs. As you can see, the block damage is definitely more than against the Venom that we had, because I don't have all those physical resists, and plus I'm a little bit worse about pushing him to special 2, so certainly he's throwing more special 1s into my block, and that's my own fault. So I would like to try to get my dance break all the way, but anytime he dashes at you, you have to be ready to block there. So as you can see, the damage is definitely doing more. If I wanted to increase my damage, like if he had more health, I would certainly try to weave in some heavy attacks, which would increase my bleed potency. Okay, there I was able to double up my buffs by finishing the dance break. So now you can see the numbers are getting pretty high. I have the 2 precisions, and basically all of these buffs are doing more to get damage. I have a fury now because I have so many buffs stacked. Because I got the heavy on, I was able to get the thing that increases the bleed, and man, he went down pretty quick. So, you know, in terms of just straight up damage, Venompool is definitely going to win in that contest. Let me just show you quickly the numbers of how fast these fights went down. So Venompool was 83 hits, and it took him 1 minute and 51 seconds. And just keep in mind that I had to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the fight dancing around to get the evade counter in place. And also I never got to a special 3, which would make it like the spicier thing, which allows him to get even more damage, and I didn't weave in that many heavies. So this was sort of just like a short, medium fight, and it was that long. Venom himself was 115 hits, and it took 2 minutes and 1 second. It's also of note that the special 2 of Venom has a lot more hits, whereas Venompool is just 1 big hit, and then he does the dance break. So the hit counter is a little bit inflated, but it was 10 seconds faster for Venompool. And as I said, both of them I didn't play ideally. And for sure, you know, if you check out other people's YouTube channels, you'll know that Venompool in a long fight is definitely going to outdamage Venom, because, you know, if I got to the special 3, if I weaved in more heavies, if I got even more of the fury buffs, or perhaps had some synergies or things like that, I would have like well outdamaged him. So let's talk a little bit about these 2 champions and why I still consider Venom the better of the 2, but why I do think that Venompool does have some use in the game. So Venom, both of them, before we get into this bullet list, you know, they both have some very interesting things. They have the ability to regen off the special 1. They have the ability to stop Spider-Man evade. They have the ability to not be power drained by tech champions. So all of those things they share in common, even though they get to them in different ways. But the things that I think make Venom better is that Spider-Man evade is able to be countered right from the start. You don't have to do anything, unless if there's some kind of like buff buffet or power snack type thing, which you would never use Venom for that anyway. As long as you have that Clintar buff right at the beginning of the fight, it's shut off for the entire time. As we saw in this fight, the fact that some of his buffs are defensive is actually a plus in my book. He gets an armor up, which of course has the utility against someone like Havoc that Venompool doesn't. And he also gets the physical resistance, which really does help with the block damage and the parries and things like that, or like the web cartridges like we just saw. Now, I was noticing that the block damage was about 20% less on Venom when I looked back at my video when he had the physical resistance up and 1 armor. So definitely you'll last longer in the fights. And similar to that with survivability, the regen potential for Venom is on any kind of opponent buffs, whereas with Venompool, you're able to remove the buffs and get more on your spicy meter, your cooking meter, which is able to give you, you know, like more offense. But armor up is the only buff that you're able to nullify or remove to gain the regen, which is a little bit of a nerf to the original Venompool. You know, given he's a much better champion now, but in the old days he was able to do it with any buff. And the reason this is nice is because Venom can essentially act like a mystic champion in some fights. Like, for example, in map 7, there's a Miles Morales who has like increased chance to evade, and he also has Rage. So you're definitely going to be going over that damage cap, and you're going to be giving him Furies, but Venom can remove those Furies with his special 1, which is very easy to access, and also regen off of it. So that's a fight that Venompool would not be able to do in the same way. He could remove the buffs and increase his damage, but he's not going to be able to regen off it, which is one of the nicest features about it. The other thing that Venom has that Venompool doesn't have is the armor break access on the heavy. That has a lot of utility unto itself. Besides just removing armor, placing an armor break is always nice for, Killmonger or Iron Man Infinity War. He has the True Strike at the end of the fights, which is a direct Iron Man Infinity War counter. As you know, he will not auto block you. And I think this is really what it boils down for me. He has a simpler play style, and he has a very low reliance on RNG. The only RNG that comes into play with Venom is the type of buffs that he's getting, and you can always re-roll them with your heavy, and you can also throw a special 2, which will basically turn them all into Furies temporarily, and then you can start over. But everything else, the evade, the heavy attack, the special attacks, there's really no RNG, and because of that, you can bring him into a utility fight like in one of the variant contents or map 7 or something like that, and you know that he's reliable. Okay, we're gonna move on to Venompool now. And like I said, I don't want to be negative because I actually really do think they did a good job with him. I just don't think that he's going to be a full-on Venom replacement. So talking about Venompool, he definitely has more damage than Venom, even in shorter fights, because we saw in this short fight, which Venom had more utility to counter, Venompool was still able to get through it, and part of that is because of this power gain that he has on the special 2, and that he gets the Energize buffs as well. And Energize is amazing because you can just get right back up to a special 2, spam special 2s, keep getting the power gain, and then occasionally you'll be able to finish a dance break and you'll be able to double up your buffs. You can get to a special 3 faster. So in terms of like the flow of getting to special attacks and the fact that all of his buffs are offensive in nature, even the power gain ones in my opinion, I think in a short and medium fight he's going to be a little bit better than Venom. In a long fight he's going to be way better than Venom. So there's that. The other nice thing about Venompool is that he does not need his SIG ability. As we saw, I was hoping that my SIG ability would help me out in that last fight, and it did not. I ended up getting the wrong buff at the beginning, even though I selected it, which meant that the whole point of trying to bring him into, an awakened one to fight the Spider-Man ended up not working. So because of that, it really is a minimal impact because you can't depend on it. And I therefore think it's not worth giving him SIG stones or awakening him, and he's just going to do fine. I think that's a plus. The other thing he has that Venom doesn't is damage over time against robots. Essentially, the bleed will turn into a degeneration, which is really nice. It kind of reminds me of how Ultron does the same thing to mutants who are bleed immune. And now here we get to kind of the meat here. He's a solid Venom replacement for an early or mid-game player. So once again, I do believe that Venom is still the better champion because of his reliable utility. However, if you are a progressing player and you pull Venompool and you don't have Venom, this guy is going to be able to cover the same ground as Venom. Even though it's not quite as reliable, it still ticks all those boxes. And I think that's the real beauty of this buff program, is that we're allowing the early and mid-game players a chance to get a champ and not be like, oh man, this champ is total trash. But this champ is actually going to be able to help me get through things like variants and whatnot. So that's the main plus, I think, with Venompool. Some other things to note is he has really good synergies with some really great champs. I would point you to the video of DLL, Daddy Longlegs 93. He's an alliance mate of mine, and he had a really interesting Labyrinth of Legends video where he showed that with 1 or 2 synergies, Venompool can bypass Limber, which makes him a very interesting piece in Labyrinth of Legends if you're trying to tackle that or anywhere else there's Limber. There's lots of other benefits like increased buffs and debuffs that you can get with him, and they're all with some pretty interesting champs. So check out those synergies, because that's something that Venom doesn't have in the same way that Venompool does for team building. The other thing is he gets so many unique buffs, and they're so interesting and not the ones that you would expect in the game, that he is really good for incursions, because there's certain things that, like, if you have unique buffs you get more attack, etc. And he's really good for the new Cavalier EQ, which sort of has a similar benefit of unique buffs. So because of that, I think he would be a very, very fun option for both of that. And last but not least, he's just a really creative and fun design. Like I said, we've got Deadpool, who's like one of the most insane characters in the Marvel Universe, bonded with the Venom symbiote. And, you know, it's not exactly in canon that this character exists. I think he exists in one of the What If universes, but there is a like possibly canon explanation of the Venom symbiote after Secret Wars in 1984, bonding with Deadpool for just a short second before Peter Parker ended up bonding with the symbiote. And some people debate whether this is canon or not. I personally don't think it is, but there is a funny little one-off of Deadpool bonding with the symbiote, and because he was so insane, they decided that this union was not going to last, and that explains a little bit of the origin of the Venom symbiote being kind of a nut job. And yeah, that's what happens when these two characters meld into one symbiotic being, is that they are completely random, they are completely insane, and when you are playing them, it feels like that, because these buffs are coming up that you've never seen before. You're trying to finish your dance breaks. It's like spicy, and like food meters and things like that. Man, I don't even remember what they're called. They're so crazy. He's a really fun character, and I think he's gonna be a fun one for a lot of people. My bottom line just is I would still prefer Venom, because the utility that Venompool brings is not stuff that I really need right now to counter a lot of things in the game, whereas Venom does it just a little bit more reliably. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Bottom line, I do really like Venompool, and I think I've outlined enough reasons why I think Venom is slightly better. But thanks for checking it out, and I will catch you guys in the next one.